So I would like to introduce you to Nicole. She is a intermediate product designer at Entelect, and she is very passionate about design systems. And I've seen her do a similar course on auto layout before, and her passion is truly contagious. So I hope you all enjoy this session, and I look forward to handing over to her. So Nicole, over to you.
Sweet, thanks so much, Esty. Yeah, thanks for joining, everybody. Like she mentioned, I'm Nicole. I am pretty much a hardcore auto layout evangelist. Wherever I go, I'm like talking about it. If you're on my team, you're probably sick of it, hearing me talk about it. But it's just something that once I understood how much it could impact my daily designing, I couldn't look back after that. It's really just changed the way that I construct screens, everything really, components, everything from the ground up. So I'm hoping that, you know, more than a tutorial today, which we will obviously go over like the basics of auto layout, and we'll construct a screen together and a component. I think that this is more going to be a buy-in session, because I think that you need to be motivated to use something that is intimidating or feels like out of reach, or you may be not even really that interested in. You need to be motivated to see like what it can do. So hopefully by the end of that, you feel some kind of buy-in to using this tool. That being said, I am going to share my screen and go through just a few need to knows around auto layout. So these are just like the 3 things that come to mind for me from a designer's perspective, from a developer's perspective, or like from development perspective, that are great motivators, reasons to use auto layout. And also I found that if you become in love with it as much as I am, you find the need to defend it. You get a lot of pushback around auto layout. It's kind of like a contentious issue or like tool for you know, I understand the reason it's a little bit of a curve to learn. And it can feel like it slows you down and things like that. So I've surprisingly received like a lot of pushback from designers on using auto layout. So let's just go through some of the reasons that I think you can just kind of keep in your mind for those conversations, or even just for your own knowledge. Cool. First up, why should designers care? It makes your designs more flexible. Okay, this is probably the most obvious benefit, but definitely the most important. Without auto layout, we are just designing something that looks perfect in one exact state or instance or scenario. The copy is the right length, the card has the right amount of content, the spacing is neat, everything behaves just so because we've manually placed it there. But real products don't stay that tidy. Labels change, content gets added, someone needs another row, a button suddenly has a longer name, much longer. An auto layout helps the structure hold up when those things happen. So instead of fixing every little thing by hand, the design can adapt in a much more predictable way. Second, it grounds your iterations in reality. This is where I think auto layout can start shifting how you think about executing designs technically. You're not only asking, oh, how does the screen look, and does this look good this way? You're also asking at the same time, what happens when this content changes? What should stretch? What should stay fixed? What belongs together? That matters because real interfaces are full of awkward edge cases, long names, wrapping text, empty states, extra cards, fewer cards, all the things that usually expose whether a design is actually working. So your iterations, and honestly, even from conceptual phase work, I would say, become a lot more practical because you're testing the behavior of the layout while you are designing, while you're iterating. So not just at the end, maybe when you are prepping for dev handoff, suddenly all of the what about when questions start popping up. It's a lot more like prepared. Thirdly, it will make you faster. This is the hill I will die on. Yes, auto layout can and will feel slower at first, especially when you're still learning and getting used to it. And yes, it does take a bit more thought upfront to set up the structure for a screen properly. But that is not wasted time. That is the work that saves you from manually nudging 20 things later because one line of text changed, Or when the client comes back and says, oh, we actually want that bottom section to be moved to the top, and it implicates like 30 screens, which, let's be honest, happens always. If you invest in a strong layout from the get-go, swapping content, resizing, moving entire sections, adding, removing items will be so much faster. So all of that is from a design perspective. How does this affect developers? It makes layout intent clearer. So for developers, auto layout gives much better clues about what we actually mean. A flat design can show how something looks, but it doesn't explain how it should behave. Should this card grow with the content? Should this button stay fixed? Should these items stack? Should they stay the same when the screen gets wider? An auto layout that's set up properly, the logic is much easier to read, and the developer is not only looking at the final visual, they can see the structure behind it as well. It also reduces handoff guesswork. A lot of issues around handoff come from those tiny decisions that were obvious to us in the design file, but not obvious to someone building it. Things like, is the spacing intentional? Did it just land here? Is this padding consistent across, desktop and tablet? What happens when the text kind of runs on? Does it wrap? Those kind of things. Auto layout helps answer those questions earlier, embedded into the design. It makes the rules more visible, which means fewer assumptions, less back and forth messages around intent on the UI, and less room for the design to be interpreted differently in the final build. Lastly, it gets design closer to code. Now, this does not mean that Figma magically spits out like beautiful code, perfect screen, from a code perspective, but it does mean that the design starts speaking a language that is closer to how developers already think and build. Interfaces are built with containers, spacing, alignment, constraints, and responsive behavior. Auto layout lets us describe those same ideas inside the design file or on your screen. So when a developer opens a well-structured component, they're not just seeing a picture of the UI, they are seeing the layout logic, what sits inside, what sits inside what, how elements relate to each other, and how the design should respond when the content or screen size changes. Cool. That's the end of my spiel. Let's get into the basics of auto layout. Okay. If you have your Figma open, feel free to just pop in 3 little like ellipses or little shapes here to play around with. I've also given them like different colors so we can kind of keep track of what's what here. Okay, first thing we can see in the layers over here is that these are kind of just floating individually, they're not really connected in any way to each other, but we want to put them in an auto layout. There's a couple ways that we can do this. The first way is, I think if we go Command Option G, Command Option G it wraps things in a frame. This is just a normal frame. It's not an auto layout frame. You can see here that the auto layout stuff is kind of peeking through here, but it's been automatically selected as freeform. And that basically means that none of the benefits or the features of auto layout are being applied to this frame. You can take a frame and convert it to auto layout by clicking this little button here that says toggle auto layout. You can click on that, right? And now you can see that our frame has been converted. That little icon has changed from like the hatch to these 2 little bars stacking next to each other. The other way, and the best way to do it, is to use shortcut. Just a little caveat on shortcuts. If you find yourself kind of using your right click, looking down for something over and over, or you keep going down over to the side panel to repeat the same action, try and see if there is a shortcut for that function that you're doing repeatedly. The same way that we kind of design for cognitive overload for our users is the same rule that kind of gets applied to us. We are also subject to cognitive load. And I think that the more shortcuts that you implement into your ways of working, the less that you are adding to the load on your brain at the end of the day. It takes a lot of little bits of your brain and your ability to think to go and look for these things over and over. So shortcuts are the way. So one of the shortcuts I use the most is obviously to wrap things in an auto layout, and that is Shift A. Cool. Shift A brings us into an auto layout. That's also really helpful for when you have an item on its own. You'll notice that my option to toggle an auto layout on a single item isn't available here, because at this level, it's kind of assuming that it's embedded that it has to be 2 or more items for that option to appear. So if I go Shift A on a single item, I kind of circumnavigate that whole constraint. So that's just my little thing on the shortcuts. Great. Okay, we've got our 3 little ellipses in an auto layout. Now, if we look over to the right here, you'll see we have all of these cool auto layout settings. This is pretty much the extent of it all. Again, just to point out these little bars here, that little logo, like icon, is hinting to you not only that this is an auto layout frame, but also what the stack orientation is. So you'll see these little bars are stacked next to each other. So that means that our auto layout has predicted correctly that we want these little dots to be stacked horizontally next to each other. Okay, so there you can see there's our also a little icon there that's similar to that. You can see everything kind of goes, you want things next to each other. The same can be applied for vertically stacking things. So you'll notice our little icon here changed to like the little stacking, and also this little alignment grid also moved to, hey, we're stacking these things. So there's all these cool little things that are indicating to you like which orientation is applied to which layout. And this becomes really helpful when you've got like layouts inside of layouts, which we'll get to just now. Okay, so that's really simple. You can see that we can kind of flip between vertical and horizontal stacks. Super simple. Something to just note, you'll notice over here in this little corner that this little icon for this little arrow that is called wrap only really appears on horizontal. I'll show you how that works in action, but basically a little bit later. But basically what it means is that we want the items. If I duplicate items within this frame that go past a certain point, I want them to run onto the next line like wrap. It's exactly like wrapping text. It just runs onto the next line automatically. And that only applies to the horizontal stacking. Cool, we'll get to that a little bit later. Then you'll see this grid option here that is in beta. It only showed up for me like a week or so ago, or I only noticed it a week or so ago. I've played around with it a little bit. It looks quite cool, but we're not going to talk about it today, just for the fact that it's in beta and I haven't played with it that much. So we're just going to live in this space, which is fine. Anyways, okay. Next thing I want to draw your attention to are these 2 little drop downs here. We have W, which is for the width, the left and right, and we have our height, which is the top and bottom. And you'll notice that they have a little indication here that they have automatically been set to hug. Now, what that means is that literally it is just hugging the content inside of it. That frame is going to adapt to whatever is inside of this frame. So if I go ahead and delete this black dot over here, if we click on this frame, you'll see that it has shrunk to accommodate the lack of that piece. Similarly, if I duplicate it, my frame has stretched horizontally to accommodate it as well. From a height perspective, the same thing kind of applies. It will hug the tallest piece of content inside of that frame. So that is how that works. I'm going to kind of come to this in a bit. I want to draw your attention to this little drop down here. This is our gap between objects, okay? Pretty self-explanatory. You'll notice when I hover over it, it brings up these little pink bars on my frame here. If I hover, you can see, or alternatively, I can go into my frame. If it's selected, hover over that, and you'll see that cool hatching shows up where I can click and drag this gap to kind of expand or contract. That is pretty much how that works. I will say something to note about this is that you'll notice if I kind of play with this one, it's affecting the other gaps as well. So in one auto layout, you can't say, oh, I want a specific gap for this and different gaps for these. One layout equals one gap setting. If you wanted to have a different gap between these 2 items, you'd have to put those inside of their own layout, give them that gap, and then bring that layout into this one. We'll get to that as well just now. Cool, so that's how that gap works. Something I want to point out as well now here is if I grab this piece like this, you'll notice that my little dots stay to the left side of my layout. They still have that gap between them. They're independent objects, and layout knows I want space between them, but they're staying on the left. That is where this little alignment grid comes into play. If I can even grab this, open up like that, that is where our alignment kind of comes in. So you can see it's sticking to the center of the left of my layout. I can change that to top left, middle, bottom right, etc. You get the idea, right? Also, something to notice, I just manually went and grabbed this frame and pulled it across, right? So what I did, what that does is it actually overrides the hug setting. So you'll notice my little drop downs here no longer say the little word hug. They've changed it to fixed. So basically Figma's going, okay, you obviously want this frame to be this size and not to hug what's inside. As soon as I kind of pull it away from the hugging what's inside of it, it will automatically set it to fixed. So that is how that works. The next thing that I wanted to point out to you is going back to the gap over here. We have the option to set like a manual gap like we were playing over here, or we have the option to select auto. Another way that we can select auto is by double clicking in our little alignment grid here. If I double click there, you'll notice that my gap goes to auto. And if I hover over it, it says auto. That just means that Figma is saying, okay, you want me to take these objects and automatically fill in all of the spaces to fill up the space of this layout, this frame. So think of it as kind of like pushing things apart in an even space. So if I grab this frame and I pull it apart, you'll notice that everything kind of stays in its place. The green one stays in the middle, this one stays on the left, this one stays on the right, because Figma is automatically keeping the gap between them. Okay. I am going to bring things back into the center. I'm going to set these things to hug again, hug and hug. Okay, now I'm going to move into padding. Something to know about padding, it is applied to the inside of your layout frame. Okay, so this is our horizontal padding, left and right. This is our vertical padding, top and bottom. We also have this cool toggle here that says individual padding. If I click on that, it kind of separates those things out. So I can state, okay, I only want 20 padding on the right, 20 on the left kind of thing. So if I can I'll do that. Let's go 20 on the left, 30 on the right. We can see that that's kind of applied into the layout. It's kind of extended the layout. It's still set to hug. Hug includes the padding. Padding is kind of adding to that space on the inside to the edges of your layout. Okay, so I'm going to bring these down together and give them like equal padding on either side here, top and bottom, all of that. Okay, something else I want to point out, you can apply effects to your layout. So these are the contents, again, inside of my layout. This is my layout, and I can apply things to it. So if I go down here and I go fill, I can click on fill, and it gives that entire layout a white background. I can also go ahead and give it stroke. I can increase that over there, and there you go, added that. I can also add a drop shadow as well. Layer blurs, anything really. So you can start to see how a lot of things, hopefully by now, can be constructed, getting a hint at that. So now that we've got this kind of applied, I'm going to label this little layout as blocks. And that's something I'm going to state now as well. If you are new to auto layout or it's your personality, apparently, I would highly recommend getting in the habit of labeling your layouts. It becomes so much easier to be able to see, especially when we get layers and layers and layers of auto layouts, which section, which layout I'm actually talking about here, which ones I want to make adjustments to, which ones I want to grab quickly and paste somewhere else. If I can see them at a glance in my layers panel, that is just so much easier than like clicking 100 times, seeing if I could figure out what the right layout is. Otherwise, you're getting frame number 00218 1,000 different ways, and you've got to kind of like figure that out on your own. So I highly recommend labeling your layouts. That helps you. It helps the future designer who picks up your work. It also helps the developers see what we're talking about here. So I've given it a label. I am going to give it another layout in over and around it. Okay, so I'm going to take this whole blocks layout and I'm going to go Shift A again. Now you can see Figma automatically just kind of gives you a little bit of padding here, 10, 10, a gap of 10. That gap of 10 is also applied now to this layout and things that are inside of it. We don't see it right now because we've only got one thing in it, and that's this blocks thing, this blocks layout. We can also see this frame over here is saying, okay, I think you want things stacked vertically. I'm going to mix those up, guys. Vertically, and the blocks is still set to horizontal. So if I go and duplicate this whole, blocks section, we can see that it's stacked it underneath because frame 1 is saying the stuff in here you want to go underneath each other, while the block stuff still maintains the next to each other stuff. So let me give this also a fill so we can take a look at it. Let's give it something not so angry. Something like a blue. Okay, let's give it a fill. Let's go 30 and 30 just to play around with things. Okay, I think I'm going to delete this one. This is the part where I want to talk about some of the settings over here. Okay, so let's see. If I go click on this blocks layout here, because things are stacked horizontally, I have the wrap option. So I'm going to select this wrap option. Okay, cool. So it has already kind of done something funny here. I'm going to go ahead and move it out like that. I think it might be because this is, that's why. This is set to a fixed width when I want it to hug the contents inside. But now it's kind of already adapted to the fact that this is next to each other. I want this layout to also hug what's inside. So that's set to hug, or this is set to, let's see if we set that to fill, and this is set to hug. Yeah, there we go. And then this is, we have selected wrap on. Okay, cool. I think that just behaved that way because I had set, this was initially set to fixed. I had played around with it. But if it's set to hug, yeah, you might have to just kind of like nudge it around a little bit and figure it out. You can already see I had to play around with that a little bit. Okay, if I go ahead and duplicate this black, yeah, we can see that that wraps on to the bottom. You'll notice though, when we selected wrap, that an additional little gap setting appeared here at the bottom. That is about the gap between the rows. So if I grab this and I bring it down, we'll see the stuff that has gone on to the next line. That gap between those two pieces. I can also additionally change the layout of these. If I bring this down a little bit, you can see that I can change the way that these are aligned. And it's just changed to acknowledge that this is kind of going into like a bit of a grid system now. So yeah, I just wanted to show how that works. I'm going to go back to hug here, and I wanted to just talk to some of these settings. I think that's the last bit here. So something that you'll notice, if I zoom in really close here, remember this blocks layout here, which I am going to take the wrap off for now. This blocks layout here, I applied a stroke of like 3 pixels to it. If I zoom in really close here, you'll notice that the hatching on this padding here, this is our padding, kind of overlaps that stroke. And that's because auto layout will automatically always just give you the presets that you want your strokes to be excluded from your auto layout. So it doesn't really include it in like as pixels to be added onto. If I change it to included, right, now we can see that hatching is no longer applied to the stroke, and it only applies after the stroke. So you can kind of think like that your stroke is kind of additional padding outside of your layout if you go with this option. But I have never felt the need to really play around with this yet. I probably will one day, but that's just something to note about auto layout, that's how that works. It automatically goes to excluded, which has worked fine for me. Another thing that I want to just chat to is the stacking. So if I grab these gaps, you can see I can kind of bring them down to 0, and you can even bring them down to stack on top of each other by pulling them into a negative. And we'll notice now that this black piece at the end, it's like the last one is on top. And that's because it also automatically sets the canvas stacking or things inside of your layout to stack the last one on top. You can switch that around to say first on top, so just the other way around. Also just a cool thing to know. Last thing is our text. If I just went T, by the way, that's a cool shortcut to know, T for text. I brought in just a little word here. If I can click and drag it into my layouts, you'll see that you can kind of see it over here, this blue. It's telling me like, which layout do you want to drag this into? Sometimes that's finicky. It can be a bit funny when there's a lot of layouts, but it's helpful. If I drag that in here and I select my blocks layout, go to my settings and say align text baseline, now it's saying that it's disabled. That basically means that my text needs to just obey the rules of the layout that I've set. So that is like top left aligned, right? If I go and say, no, I want to align the text to the baseline, it will bring it down to the bottom. So the text gets like its own special rules inside of the auto layout. Cool. That is the basics of auto layout. With all of that being said, I would love to take you guys through building an entire page, like a little card, not a card, like a screen in auto layout. We can go and recreate this whole thing using auto layout. If you're following along, I'm basically going to be repeating what I've just done so far. But I think that if you're still fuzzy after all of that, which, you know, apologies if that's a bit rough, but if you're still fuzzy, hopefully this will bring a little bit more clarity because it's a bit more contextual for us. Like we understand this and I can explain my reasoning as I'm going and as I'm figuring it out. You'll see me troubleshooting things when I come across like, why isn't it working? That's just what it's like to set up an auto layout. But yeah, by the end, we'll have a really cool screen. If you're following along, you'll notice that I have these little icons here. If you don't have that, you can quickly go to your plugins and go and search for the material design icons. Just grab a few random icons, I would say at like 24 pixels, or you can just go ahead and grab your little lockies or whatever you used over here and bring them in here and make them smaller. If you're not aware of this trick, by the way, on your layout on something like this, for instance, you'll see here we have the option, we have a width and a height. We have this little option here that says lock aspect ratio. I've been using this a lot lately once I discovered it, and I can just bring that down to 24. And it doesn't, for some reason, lock the ratios correctly, but it kind of brings it down to, it should be like 24. It's adjusting it weirdly, maybe because it's an ellipse. But generally, it means like if I type 24 in here, it translates the height to 24 as well. You can see that's pretty much good enough. So yeah, go ahead and bring those down, and maybe you can play along with those if you like. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and delete them. Pretend those are your icons. I've also got a text like typeface that I thought matched this screen really well. I just grabbed the screen off Google Images because it looked really cool, and I thought it had a great example to play around with auto layout. Cool. First thing I'm going to do, is, look, take all of my icons, and you'll see I've got like a few logos in here or whatever. I want to use one icon and be able to switch between them. So that means I'm going to have to create them. I'm going to have to grab them and put them in a component set. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab all of these. And I am going to say, go over here to my frame, go to component, and say create component set. Great. I'm going to label this icons. They've inherited all of my names because I had labeled the frames what I want them to be called. Just something to also note about icons, they have to have the same name. Every single one of these in this component set have to have the same name inside as vector. So the name of the variant is one thing, but what is inside has to be labeled vector. If you've got multiple things like here, like our Apple Pay is a little bit complicated, you have to unionize it and call, so that's our little vector that's been unionized, and then the unions represented as a group that also needs to be called vector. You might have like unnecessary little blocks in there that are also called vector, but they're not actually part of the icon. You have to get rid of those as well if you want your icons to inherit the colors of your components. That'll become a little bit more clear in a bit. Okay, so we've got our little icon set. So that means now I can grab these and go change them between credit card, clothes, etc., all of that cool stuff. I see also that we didn't really label this correctly. So I'm going to go and change this property. You can select like one and see it's been given a property, and this one is chevron. Property is just like the way that we can differentiate between the variables. So right now I'm just going to go, this is type, like these are my icons and I have to choose my type. Cool. First things first, I have my little back button. I have a title. I'm going to grab a copy of my text over here. I think that it's set to like a semi-bold kind of thing. I'm going to grab my chevron over here, change it to close. Cool. And I see that my icons also have this like nice blue color. So I'm just going to be eyedropping. You'll see me use the eyedropper tool a lot today. Ideally, in your spaces, you're using your design system colors, if that's styles or variables, or it's encoded in your components anyways. But yeah, today I'll be using the eyedropper tool. Cool. So I've got these elements together. I'm going to put them together with an auto layout, Shift A. Great. First thing I'm going to do, change frame 1 to say header or heading. Maybe heading is better. Cool. I'm going to say this is payment. Sweet. So what do we notice here? It's set to hug on the width, hug on the height, gap of 18. I don't know that the gap is going to be 18. If I grab this, that's really not how I want it to behave. I want this icon to stay on the left. I want this icon to stay on the right, and I want payment to stay in the center. Perfect solution to that is our spacing, our gap, set to auto. Now I can move this however I want, and it's responding, and everything's staying where I want it to stay. Whoopsie, let me just fix that. Cool. I also do want it in the center. I don't want it top alignment. I want it like aligned centered. Okay, cool. So we have our heading done. Next, we're going to create our next component. And this one's going to be a little bit more involved than our like component set over here. I'm going to go ahead and grab this icon because it's already got that blue. This is kind of a radio button, right? We can see that this is the selected state, but I also see the screen has some, what do you call these? Like deselected, not selected, default, let's call it default states. So there's going to be repeated items. I can see in my like designs that I'm going to use this piece a lot. So I'm going to go ahead and just recreate this as it is right now. So I've got my credit card icon. Cool. Let me grab another text. I just grabbed it right out of this layout and just copied it and pulled it out. I think that's a bit smaller. Let's say this is probably going to be like a 14, maybe like a 16. Let's see. Cool. And then I've got my radio button. Let's go. This is going to be the checked version. So radio checked. Okay. something to notice as I didn't mention it earlier, but as I'm changing these icons, notice how they've kept the blue and they're not changing back to black, which is what they come from. I've set this to say, I want this icon to be blue. And as I switch between them, they inherit that color. That's because of that little vector trick. They have to all have kind of the same properties in order for Figma to go, oh, you want this to be the same. It's like a same replacement. So if you're having issues with your icons, that's probably what the issue is. Just a little tidbit for free there. Okay, now I'm going to change this to credit card. Oopsie. Cool. Now again, just going to grab these, all three of them, and go Shift A, put it in layout. Great. I'm going to call this my radio button. I think that's going to be the layout that will become the radio button. Anyways, I can see that we've got it kind of left and top aligned, and I want it to be centered. But if I do this, it's kind of, that's not really how I want it to behave, right? I want credit card icon and the word to stay next to each other and to have a certain gap. But I can imagine that this radio button needs to kind of stay on the edge. Now, earlier I was mentioning if you want different spacing inside of a layout, as opposed to, you know, this piece, you need to create another layout inside. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, right? We've got our radio button layout. I'm going to grab credit card. I'm going to select it. I'm going to hold Shift and grab the credit card icon. Now, those are the two that I want to create a layout for. I'm going to go Shift A. So now notice here in radio button, inside, we've got now frame 1. This is where labeling comes in handy as well, because notice how I can't see the words frame 1 here. I can't see that there's necessarily a layout at this glance. So that's really helpful. So I'm going to go ahead and go icon plus label. Label. Cool, so that's that section. I think that's going to have a gap. This has now its own gap. It behaves its own way. This is, I want this to be set to hug. So this layout, I want to hug everything inside, which is the icon and the credit card words, hug. I'm going to give this a gap of, I would guess, what, like 12? No, probably like a 24. Sure. Now, if I grab this, okay, cool. Still not really behaving how I want. So this is kind of staying in the center. But if we grab the radio button layout, we can see, oh, this is center aligned here. So if I click that, cool. But I still want this to kind of go across here. I want this to kind of be pushed towards the right. So what I have to do is go, okay, I want this spacing between you to be automatic. I want Figma to automatically fill that space for me. Great. Now the radio button is chilling at the right there. Cool. Now I think that's set up correctly. Now I need to start the styling. So I'm going to start adding, we need this stroke around here. I'm going to apply it straight onto this radio button layout, but first we need to get the size right. So let's add some padding. I'm going to go on the left and right. I'm going to assume that's like, let's say that's also like a 24 maybe, or maybe that's like an 18. Okay, cool. And then that's quite big on the top there. Maybe that's 24. Cool, maybe a bit big. 22, 20. Let's go with that. Cool. Now I think that's pretty much the size that I'm going to go for. I want it to have a stroke. I am going to go plus over here. Great. I'm going to do the eyedropper tool, grab that blue. That's the stroke that I want. Great. I do want it to be thicker though. So let's go ahead and add it to like a 2, maybe a 3. I don't like unevens, but it is what it is. I think it's a 3. Okay, cool. Now we need the rounded corners. We can also do that over here on the appearance. I can apply that effect to my layout. Notice we also have this little option over here, individual corners. If I click on that, same thing as individual padding and all of that. You can go and stipulate, I only want this corner to have this radius and the rest to be flat, stuff like that. But for now, we're going to go with all of them. I think we'll give it a radius of 14. Let's go 14. Cool. Now we've got our radio button. Sweet. I want to make it a component, and I want to be able to switch between a selected state and a default state. So I'm going to go ahead and make this a component. Great. Now, the next thing I need to do is go ahead and add a variant, right? You'll notice here, it's added this little dotted line. We've got another little variant here. It's a direct duplication of what I've just made. And we'll see, again, this property thing has shown up. It's like, what do you want to call this variant? How are we going to identify like what the variants mean? So I'm going to call this state, right? And then this is going to be selected or deselected. Okay, I want to show you a cooler way of doing that, because there's always a cooler way, but I'm going to show you, I'm going to just quickly grab this stroke and make it darker so that we can just acknowledge, so we can see somehow that we've changed between them. So if I grab an instance of this, you'll see I have my state, and I can say it's selected or it's deselected. The deselected changes to the one I set as deselected. But a cooler way of doing it, you can kind of code, it's like mini coding in Figma, is I'm going to go ahead and change the name of this to say selected, like it's kind of like a question. Is this thing selected? This one is yes. This one is no. That can also be true or false. Now, if I pull out an instance, Figma will automatically say, oh, this is a yes, no instance. I'm going to give you a toggle here. So I can toggle on selected or not selected. That's just a cool little option. You know, obviously it doesn't work if you've got multiple states or things like that. But that is very helpful, comes in handy quite often. So I'm going to go ahead and use that one because it's cooler. Okay, now we need to style this piece. I'm going to do that kind of quickly. Let's go with 1 on the stroke. Also, this color is like a very light gray. Right, okay. We also need our icon here to be set to unchecked. Cool, it also needs to replicate that same color over here. Oopsie, that's too white. There we go. And this is going to be our Apple Pay, like our PayPal thing. Also not going to be blue, is going to be this like dark blue kind of thing. Okay, cool. Now we've got a clearer kind of difference between our selected and our deselected state. That's great. Let's apply some Booleans here. So let's say in a future state, because it's obviously not here, I'm probably going to want the option to take these icons away. I just want them to hide, but I want the label to kind of naturally move over to the left. That's going to work because I've got it in a layout. I've got these pieces in a layout that's set to hug. It's going to hug no matter what's in there. So I'm going to go and select this icon, and I am going to say over here on appearance, right over here. This is in, by the way, has to be on your component. I'm going to go in here and click this icon. I can select both of them, but I'll show you how you can attach a property you've already made in a bit. I'm going to select this icon, go apply variant or property, variable or property, sorry. You'll see that none have been created. I'm going to go ahead and click plus, right? It already knows, Figma's trying to kind of also add that verb language in here. You want to show icon, the value is true, right? So that's saying, it's basically saying this property that you're applying here, is this what it looks like when it's true? And I'm going to say, yeah, show icons, show icon, yes, create property. You'll see that that has been added there. If I click on my component set, you'll see I've got another little property here. It's a Boolean property called show icon, and it's true. Now, if I grab this out, you'll see I have another Boolean here that says show icon. If I toggle it off, the icon disappears and the text kind of hugs to the left. And that's because, again, I set this auto layout to hug from a width perspective. So if something disappears, it's going to hug it. And it is going to be aligned to the center and left. So anything inside is just going to go in that direction that I told it to. If I hadn't applied it to this icon, or if I add other components and or other variants and it doesn't have that property, that's fine. I can go and add the same Boolean to this icon and say, okay, yes, show icon, true, sweet. Now it can also show up on this instance as well. And if I go kind of switching between them, it inherits like those properties, whether I've switched them on or not. Cool. That is how we do the Booleans and how you've encoded a kind of Boolean into the state. The last little thing I want to show you about components is bringing in like surfacing your text in your properties, right? So if I take this label, credit card, you'll notice if I select one, you'll see here it's saying, oh, you've selected a text. This is what it says. Would you like to create a variable or property here? Yeah, I would. I'm going to click on that. Go same thing, new variable or property. It's going to say, cool, you're creating a property. We're going to call it text. I'm going to say this is radio label. And it's saying the value is credit card. So that's inheriting what it's already saying. But I'm going to make it more generic and go label, because this is a component that's going to be used all over the place. I'm going to go create property. And there you'll see it changed it to say label. If I apply the same property over here, you can see, oh, okay, cool. Do you want to apply something? If I click on there, you'll see that property now exists. If I click on that, it's going to change it also to label. So that's a little different from the other Boolean properties. The text properties act a little bit differently. But what this means is that I can grab this out, and here I will see under my properties that I can change the label over here, credit card. That's super helpful when we've got like a lot of properties, and maybe like if you think about text inputs that have like a label and an input, it's really helpful to be able to see that at a glance there. Cool, we've got a really cool component here. Let's bring it over here and just go with it. Let's bring it over here. Great. Next, I need to create this little card over here, which looks a little scary, but we'll take it one step at a time. Okay. I'm going to say this is 16, this heading over here, and maybe it's actually like a medium, and maybe it's a 14. Okay, I'm going to say your card, oopsie, card information. Cool. That's my heading. It's chilled for now. Let's grab the next piece. Doesn't really need an auto layout. I think it's going to be wrapped in everything here. Now we're going into this little table here. I can see that this is really 2 rows, and they've got like a border kind of going on here. Now you could kind of put this in a layout, give it a stroke only on the bottom, which you can do like if I show you here, or no, maybe not like that. If I go Shift A, and if I go stroke here, if you click over here, you can kind of set to, I want the stroke to only be at the bottom, you know, something like that. But I'm not going to do that. I think I can utilize, I think the stroke is kind of a transparency coming through from the back. So it's this background color coming through. So I'm going to utilize the spacing between the auto layouts and the background and transparency to create those border lines. Cool. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3. What is this? Cool. Just a number. I'm going to bring in an icon. Cool. It needs to be my visa, and the color needs to be, I think it's the same color as this. Cool. Visa. I'm going to grab these 2, go Shift A. I'm going to call this row, or like top row in this table. Great. Let's leave that as it is right now. Then I'm going to grab this piece over here. I'm just going to grab this text and go mm/yy. Cool. I know that's going to have to be in an auto layout, so I'm going to go ahead and just go Shift A here and call this, let's go cell 1. Then I'm going to, I think I'm actually just going to copy this over. I can utilize that. Call this cell 2. I'm going to go CVC, and I'm going to change this to the credit card. Same thing. Okay, we need some color changes here. I'm going to go with this gray, and this I think is like the same, I think it's the same gray as this. Let's bring it over here. Cool. Cool. So I've got these two in auto layouts. They're looking a bit different right now, but that's fine. I want them to be connected to each other. They're going to be sitting next to each other. So I'm going to grab cell 2 and cell 1 and go Shift A. Cool. They're in an auto layout. I'm going to go bottom row. Cool. I think let's work with this. This needs to be left aligned. Right now it's center. I'm just going to make sure that it is aligned to the center left. And I'm also going to set it to fill. If we can set both of these layouts to fill, they're both going to compete for the same space. And so they'll end up being like even, like spot on. Okay, so I'm going to set this to fill container. I'm also going to set this to fill container. So they're kind of meeting halfway. Okay, but we've got issues here where this is also, okay, it's the gap. The gap needs to be automatic. Cool, yeah. So that means like, don't push this over the bounds. If I had it before like this, it's kind of pushing it out. And we don't want that. We want it to just automatically fill the space. So it actually brings that back into the fold of this piece here. I think that the padding here that we inherited on the left and right, top and bottom, is going to work well for this as well. I'm going to go 10 and 10. Cool, and that's filling out this space. It's not quite the same. Is this set to hug? This is 10 and 10. It's because the icon has a higher height than the text. So that's fine. I'm just going to set this, this piece here from a height perspective to fill container. Cool. We still want this width to fill. We want this width to fill, but we have the issue of this little bit in here. That is set to 30. I want this to be 1 pixel because I think that that gap is going to be 1 pixel. Now, if I apply a fill to this bottom row layout over here, if I do that, I will lose the effect of that 1 pixel transparency that I'm trying to utilize. So what I'm going to do is go and grab these two separate ones, and give them a fill of white. Okay, cool. Done. I'm going to do the same thing over here. Let's give him a 10 left and right, 10 top and bottom. Cool. Okay, they're kind of making sense here. Just checking time. Cool. I also want this to have a fill of white, and it's just gonna grab that. Okay, cool. Now I'm gonna combine this top row and this bottom row. Sorry, I actually accidentally grabbed that bottom row, top row, and I'm going to put them in an auto layout. So we've got inside of this frame 1, we've got our top row, we've got our bottom row. In our bottom row, we have cell 1 on the left, cell 2 on the right. You can see how things are starting to kind of stack together. This is not the gap I really want. I want a 1 over here. Great, this is not frame 1, this is my table. Cool. Now we're getting somewhere. One last styling bit, I want those rounded corners. So I'm going to go ahead, and we're going to see an issue here. I'm going to go and add, let's go 10 rounded corners. Now you'll see that the rounded corners are not showing up here. That's because this table layout doesn't have a fill to show that it's applied that rounded edge to. The fill has been applied to these individual pieces. But a way that I can kind of get around that is by clicking on my table layout, which is my like topmost layer from this whole thing, and go clip content. So that just says like whatever I've applied to this outside layer, these are the boundaries. So if I go in here into this cell and I go like this, notice how it eventually kind of leaves it's cutting it off, basically. That's what clip content does. Okay, cool. Getting somewhere. I'm going to take this table, I'm going to take my heading, I'm going to go Shift A, put them in a layout. Now this little spacing over here is that spacing over there. I think that's too much. I'm going to go 12. Great. Cool. I see we also have like top and side padding, which looks the same. I'm going to go with like a 22 and a 22. I think it's even. Cool. Let's see if I do this. Cool. That's expanding, but this isn't. So that means that I've missed probably setting this to auto. I want that visa to stay on the right and this to stay on the left. So I'm going to go into my top row and just double click in here and go, I want that spacing to be automatic. Now, great, that's working better. That's more like it. Cool. Last thing now, I need my fill. I want to grab that blue. Boom. Now I can see, okay, that stroke is really coming through from the background. I'm utilizing that transparency well. I'm going to go with a 16 on the left and right and the top and bottom. I'm also going to apply, if we had 10, let's go with like a 14 on the outside here. Cool. Card information. That was my corner radius. Just being cognizant of time. So I'm speeding things up a little bit. I'm going to grab my components over here. I'm going to go, this is not my selected state. This is not credit card. This is going to be PayPal. This is going to be Apple. Oopsie, is it like, yeah, Apple Pay. That's like that. Cool. And then I'm going to change this icon as well. If I just double click into it, I'm going to change it to, what was it? Apple Pay. Great, I've got these two pieces together. Right. Next, I'm going to grab another text little piece here for my order total. Order total. I'm going to grab it again. I'm just going to go, this was 19 Rand because South Africa. Context. Cool. I'm going to grab these two, go Shift A and go total. Cool. And that, let's make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to. Nope, not really. Let's go and check that our spacing is set to auto. Double click. Great. I think that's correct. I want these to also be a bit on the smaller side. Cool. Next, we're going to just like really throw together a button really quickly here. I'm going to grab this text. I'm going to go confirm order. I'm going to set this text to fill to white. I'm going to grab it and go Shift A to give it its own auto layout. Great. 10 and 10. Let's go with like a 12 on top. So it seems like a little bit higher. And it is going to be center aligned, which is great. So if I do this, it's going to stay in the center. That's what I want. So let's call this button. And let's give it that nice blue fill. Great. We also need the corner radiuses to be like let's go with like a 12. Great. Now that's all kind of behaving how I want. I'm going to take this entire thing and put it in an auto layout. Shift A. Great. I'm going to call this page layout. Okay, we can see that things are acting a little funky. They probably need to correctly be set to fill. This page layout is going to just kind of encompass everything for my screen. So this I'm going to set to fill. Great, working correctly. This one I'm going to set to fill. It's a component, I can still do that. That is correctly set to fill. I'm going to grab these two actually, and this one as well. This one for good measure, and make sure they're all set to fill. So you can see we've got some mixed things going on here. That's fine. I'm going to set them all to fill. Great. Now my layout is completely responsive. I'm going to go ahead and grab a frame, iPhone 16, let's say. Cool. I'm going to grab this page layout, pop it in my frame, make sure it's like top and everything aligned. I'm going to just like grab it for the whole thing. Cool. Okay, I can see some issues. We need some side padding. Let's go to, this is the frame that I've selected. I need the page layout. I want to apply a padding of like 24, let's say, to the left and right. Now everything just goes in. So think about like your page, like your rules in your systems where all of our content needs to be 16 pixels from the left and right. Our top has like 30, pixels. Let's say like it's 24, and our bottom will always have 30 pixels at the bottom. Cool. So you can kind of embed those rules into your page layouts and your content will respond accordingly. So another thing that I've noticed is that this piece has like a little bit more spacing in between here, but all of these have like a regular spacing. So I'm going to I'm going to add some padding to the spacing here. This heading. I'm going to add padding to the bottom of it just to kind of like compensate for now. I think that's right. Let's see, what is our page layout spacing here? Let's go with like a 24. That feels about right. I think our top page layout, actually needs a higher kind of like, yeah, let's go with like a 50. Cool. Now I want the order total and the button to kind of be at the bottom, and all this stuff needs to stay at the top. So you can think about like our pushing, our automatic spacing. And so I need to now essentially create this as a separate top section and this as a bottom section. Okay, so I'm going to take this here. I'm going to take our button and our total, and I'm going to go Shift A. I'm going to call this bottom section. I'm going to take all of these and I'm going to go Shift A, top section. Great. Now I can go to my page layout and say, hey, okay, it's even actually left aligned. I want it to be centered and I want you to automatically fill that space. Now that order total just gets pushed to the bottom. Great. To further illustrate how cool this is, I'm going to change this frame to like an iPad Pro and go, okay, cool. I want this content to kind of adjust to this whole thing. Great. Maybe your tablet rules have like way bigger gutters. So you're like, actually, we have 50 gutters and on the top is actually 50 on the top and bottom. And so that kind of just brings it in. Now I need to show like, I want to show the PayPal as a selected state. I can do that. I can select this one to turn this one off. I can move this down, this section, and then adjust it for like PayPal information, that kind of thing. So you can see how quickly I can create screens and adjust them, especially for different states and scenarios, utilizing the layout that I've already made to quickly create a screen that is totally different or a continuation of the journey. And I barely had to do anything really. I mean, I know this is a very rushed kind of thing towards the end, but I'm sure you can see how beneficial this would be, you know, especially moving things down, moving things around, adding things in, how the content just kind of reacts and responds to it naturally. Cool. I wanted to end with some time to spare if there are any questions, but that is my little pitch to you on why auto layout is just the best. And we've created an entire screen here completely from auto layout. I think the only things here that aren't auto layout is the frame itself, the icons and text. Like everything else is built using auto layout. And that is super helpful down the line. I think there was something else I wanted to say, but I can't remember now. That's all I got for you folks.